Hey guys, welcome back to Willpower Garage. Today we're going to continue work on the 77 Ford, putting this diesel in. And I'm going to try to make all this from the 2002 fit in here. Right here. Or maybe a little over here. All I know is it doesn't just fit. It's going to take a little bit of hammer and banging and stick where I want it. So this is where I'm at so far. I've got the frame. This is the frame from the 02. Obviously that's still the 77 frame. I've got this thing fitting fairly well to the contours. I'm really surprised at how well this actually matched up to this frame rail. I've got the steering box just kind of held on with a really short bolt from the inside. Basically, I just want to be able to see where this is going to be for mock-up reasons before I go welding all this together and then I'm stuck. I did come to the realization, if I come down here, the 77 steering setup, I forget what this thing is called, but obviously with the other steering box, this links up to the driver's side, and then with the drag link underneath, that's what steers both tires. On the 2002, however, the steering box, which I am grafting into the frame rail to lower it so it clears all my other accessories that are on the diesel, actually uses a combination of steering link that would go and link to this drag link here, and then this drag link steers both wheels. Unfortunately, it looks like with my steering box this low, there's no way to connect that rod and make this work easily. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to basically get the steering components from the 2002, and hopefully I can make all that work in here. With the drag link connecting everything. I'm not positive how that's going to work. I'm going to have to do a little research on this. But at this point, I'm basically going to continue getting the steering box mounted where I think it should be. I mean, obviously, I've got this section of frame out of the 02, and I've got it located to the crossmember, which I'm using, so I know I'm in basically the right location. And if I hold it to the hole on the top here, it lines up fairly well to the steering column over there, so I have good clearance that way. I basically want to get this thing placed basically where it should be, and then I'll drill holes through the frame rail to get that where I want it. The more fun part is going to be if we come down here again, get some light on. Alright, if we come down here, you can see that's the bolt that's going through the steering box, but there is no frame here at all. So I'm going to have to basically make more frame rail. I don't know if I'm going to try to take it off the other truck, or I'm just going to buy some, 1/8-inch plate steel and make this fit the way I want to, and then, basically get the structure in. I'm going to have to cut the original arch here anyway, and the reasoning for that is I want to get this, sorry for the mess guys, it's been hectic. I want to get this bracket back in between the frame rail, and the reason for that bracket is to keep the frame rail from crushing in when you tighten these the bolts that come through here to hold the steering rack on. You want the strength in there, so I want to get this back in, and with this bit of frame rail in the way currently, that's not, well, not this one, up here rather, it's not going to work. So it's not the end of the world to do that. I will, you know, obviously overlap this so I have strength there. I'm not just going to butt weld that. Same for here. I'm going to lap weld that as well. But you know, I've got good overlap in a lot of places. I am really surprised at how well this actually fit into this frame rail. So that's basically where I'm at now. You know, it took a little bit to cut out the mount that was there. Not the end of the world, but it took time. I wanted to make sure I maximize the amount of steel so I can box in the whole frame rail back, because you know it is steering the truck. I want to have that strength in that rail. Also, why I want to tie it back into the engine cross mirror. I want all that strength there. You know, I mean, we're putting a custom engine. We're putting an engine that never came in here. So I expected it to be a little bit of work, but yeah, I guess that's it. As you can see, it's pretty dark out now. I'm going to probably call it for tonight because I want to look into the steering setup, and I want to make sure that I can make that work with the newer style front steering components. Before I go any further, before I really burn in that plate and, you know, finalize the position of that steering box. Today, we're gonna work like a robot. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna dress like a robot, but we're gonna finish burning in that cross member there. Make sure that thing is good and strong to hold that in. Let's hope my little 110 welder here can do the job. Do as I do. No. Do as I say, not as I do. Something like that. Alright guys, let's see what I can get done. Okay guys, as you can see, I've got most of this already starting to burn in. I've got my fitment for my steering box plate here really good. I don't think I updated you guys on this, but I've got my holes obviously drilled and my slots for the tube that goes in between there to keep this thing from crushing in when you tighten it down. Gives it a little strength to tie the two halves together. I went ahead and I graphed in the bottom part that I was missing and the difference between the 77 frame and the 2002 frame. Basically what I did was I just cut it along the curved section and then bent down that other half of the C channel that makes up the frame. I then took the little piece from the 02 frame and I just, you know, sort of CAD installed it there, a little cardboard aided design. And then this is welded on both sides, you know, with a nice thick fillet. And then on the outside, what I did was I went over this thing with the MIG and then with the TIG welder to make sure I had full penetration on here. It is plated on the inside, but I wanted the outside to look relatively smooth. The one area I am going to add extra plating is underneath here. So where the new frame section meets the old frame section, I'm going to actually put a piece of 2 inch wide, 1/4 inch thick flat plate stock that I'm going to weld from the outside of this frame to this, basically from where I added it. So all the way back here where the spring perch is, all the way up to the factory frame rail. That way I have good strength all the way through here. I don't have to worry about this cracking from flexing. On this side, I took again the section that was on the 2002, and since this thing used to have that zigzagged frame section that went through here for reinforcement, I wanted to put the strength back as much as I could. So this is another piece from the 2002. Obviously you can see where it went against the K-member, subframe, whatever you want to call this. And I basically tied it into this whole frame rail. So this frame rail is nice and stiff again. I'm also utilizing the front bumper, because this is 1/4-inch steel with brackets welded to the frame horns here, as you can see. And what I did was I found repair dimensions, basically collision dimensions for the frame. And I know the distance I need to maintain the two radiator core support holes. So I set those where they need to be. I don't remember offhand exactly. I think this 32 inches center to center. I then made sure that the frame rail on the passenger side was true and square. And then on the driver's side as well, I wanted to make sure that this outer surface and this inner surface were perfectly parallel with each other. So I know the frame rails are straight, parallel, and the distances everywhere are good. Even though I added a big section of frame here, I wanted to make sure that the frame rail stayed true. This side here, you might be asking why I had to notch this and bend the frame all weird like that. The reason is this is the motor mount location. And the motor mount is relatively big. The way the motor comes down, these holes are a little enlarged than the top. And that's so when the engine comes down straight, the holes, the bolts are almost vertical. So it's going to kind of come in here and then slide into position where it's finally going to rest. And that's the same from both sides. Obviously the motor is off-centered to the center line of the chassis, and that's because this is a four-wheel drive truck. You need that off-center. When you look back there, that's where the front drive shaft is going to be coming through. If this thing was centered, you'd have no room for that front drive shaft. So to accommodate that, I needed to take out some of the frame rail here. And what I did was I basically took my torch, heated this over so I have a nice round hard radius here, and then welded it to the frame. The frame here is also welded behind this plate before I welded this plate in. It's also welded on the back corner there. So I mean, this thing is solid to the frame. It's welded just about everywhere I can. Again, this reinforcement plate here is then welded there. I'm working on this section now. I'm going to weld this in. It'll also get welded here to the frame instead of the rivets. I mean, for one, I don't have rivets. And two, I'm just going to weld it on. It should give me plenty of the strength I need. The other thing I should point out here is, since I had so much of this frame rail cut out, I had to make sure that the spring perches here, and the springs for that matter, stayed true, flat, parallel. So I had to use basically a hydraulic ram. I just kind of pushed against either side there to make sure that my springs were laying parallel, and even from the rear spacing there to the front spacing here. But since I did that, now I need to make sure I tie this bracket back into this plate so I have the strength there, and this won't want to twist in. But like I said, I'm utilizing this front bumper here because it's holding the frame rails exactly where I need them. So with that all being said, I'm going to keep burning this section in here, and then I have a little more work to do on the transmission crossmember, mostly just for that bracket right there. Now it sits, the crossmember itself sits on the bottom part of the C channel, and then it has a secondary bracket that bolts to that and then up to the vertical part of the chassis. So I need to make sure, once I have all this welded in, get the engine back in place, bolted to the transmission, make sure everything is still lined up the way it should, then I'll mark and drill the holes for that crossmember so I can basically finalize that crossmember. From there, everything should be ready to accept the engine. The only other thing I think I'm going to do before we, do a final cleanup for this, and probably a little pour 15, so I don't have to worry about rust and this thing will look all nice before undercoating, is just make sure I can fit my turbo downpipe in that area against the firewall. I want to clearance it now before the engine's in place, and it's just too hard to get to. So, like I said, I think that little bump out there, I might have a little issue with the 3-inch downpipe, but I just want to make sure if I need to, you know, massage that firewall a little bit, I want to do it now while the engine's out. But I need the engine in place, unfortunately, to make sure my marks show me where that needs to be massaged. So, let's get to welding.